What is mindset? Our mindset is based on what we believe, and anything we believe in, we put into motion. I have spent my life putting the mindset of perseverance into motion, and now I am here today to share my journey along with others whose mindsets have changed the course of their lives. Hi, I'm mindset coach Lorraine Lindsey, and I believe that if you can change your mind, you have the power to change your life. So are you ready?
Yeah, baby. Love it. So cute.
Welcome to the Mindsetters. I'm your host, Lorraine Lindsey, and I'm here with my fabulous ladies, affectionately known as the Lipstick Ladies. Back, we have not been at the round table in quite some time. So welcome. I'm so happy to have you guys here to do the first show of this new program. So today we are here to talk about the mindset when it comes to forgiveness. And I feel like the reason why I wanted to really talk about this is because I genuinely really feel that this is something that a lot of people struggle with, that a lot of people have endured at some point in their life. If you've lived long enough, you've been hurt. And the art of forgiving, or the ability to forgive not only an offender, but when you have been the person, the perpetrator that's needing the forgiveness, I think it's something that needs to be talked about, and why forgiveness is important, and what are the steps and the stages and the understanding of forgiveness. So before we get into it, I read this great article with the Mayo Clinic, and I want to kind of read just a little excerpt on how they define what forgiveness truly is, and then we'll go right into it. So it says here that forgiveness means different things to different people. Generally, however, it involves a decision to let go of resentment and thoughts of revenge. The act that hurt or offended you might always be with you, but forgiveness can lessen its grip on you and help free you from the control of the person who harmed you. Forgiveness can even lead to feelings of understanding, empathy, and compassion for the one who hurt you. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing the harm done to you, or making up with the person who has caused you harm. Forgiveness brings a kind of peace that helps you to go on with your life. So I thought this was a beautiful way to kind of start it, just so we can kind of break down forgiveness. And what made me think about this topic actually was that about last week, I got a phone call from my ex-husband. And he's someone that I have not spoken to him, heard his voice, any communication for over the last 2 years. And out of the blue, he calls me. And he's sharing, his life. He's married now. He has a baby on the way. And there was really a space and time in my life that I never thought that I could hear him have that conversation with me, and that there would be a sense of peace. And in that moment when I was talking to him, it was like, wow, I knew I had made a decision to forgive him. I felt that emotionally I had forgiven him, but listening to him and talking to him last week, it was this piece that said, wow, I have really forgiven this person, and I feel so liberated in that. Because when I was with him, and when it ended the way it ended, it took a long time for me to overcome the pain and the hurt. And what I saw was that I moved on into relationships, and I carried that into those relationships, and even made decisions with picking a partner based on hurt and pain. And so being free of that through forgiveness, it really took me to forgive him and to have compassion for him, for me to really let some of the things that happened go. So that was my long-winded intro.
Some thoughts just came to mind when you
what comes to your mind,
Charlene? Things.
Charlene?
First, for me, forgiveness is spiritual. Forgiveness is part of the healing process in life. That's how I feel when I think about the word, and I think about the circumstances and the examples, and because it truly is an internal thing. I can say forgive all day long, but if I'm not feeling it, I'm just lying to myself, right? You don't have to forget it. Usually with healing in time, it goes back here somewhere. Hopefully it's on the forefront, but it has to be spiritual, because it comes from a place of your internal. Forgiveness is not an external thing. That's how I interpret it. It has to be within, to release whatever that is that's holding on you. And healing is, that's part of it. And as to your story, you couldn't imagine the day that you could actually have a conversation and feel at peace with him. That's healing.
Right.
That's very much. So for me, I see that forgiveness, it's a spiritual thing.
And healing is a part of a process, right? When you have been hurt, and there are so many different levels of pain, right? I'm talking about transgressions and abuse within a relationship, but there are people who have had really deep rooted hurt and pain, and it's very hard for them to, in their healing process, to conceive that part of that healing is a step, and that is forgiveness, because you almost feel sometimes when you're really hurt that if I forgive them, it somehow makes it right. Mm-hmm. And you were going to say, Ms. Carmen?
I don't know why I'm struggling with how I feel about forgiveness. And I don't know if I've ever thought about what it means to actually forgive someone. And I always say I don't hold grudges on people, or I don't, I just let stuff go. But I think now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, that is my defense mechanism. And
this is your journey.
I know. And I'm like, it's really like, I'm like, how do I really feel about forgiveness? What does it really mean to me? And I'm like, of course, it's part of a healing process. It's part of letting things go. The article you sent, the video, I don't know, you can reference it later, but when she said you forget, you're holding baggage basically. And it's like, you have to allow yourself to be angry, and you have to lash out. That's part of you forgiving. You have to create scars. You have to feel those emotions. And I know I'm rambling, but I don't normally ramble. I'm really trying to figure it out.
Which is good that you're challenged with that, because you're recognizing it's not coming easy.
Yeah.
This is part of that process for you.
And I kind of bury things, and I keep, nothing bothers me. I can compartmentalize. I can do this. I can do that. But do I really deal with my issues with people?
And that's so key, because this is what truly happens when you have the ability to just let go. Mm-hmm. And when you're telling yourself, I'm just going to let go, and you kind of bury it.
Yeah.
But you don't actually deal with it. It's kind of when you shared your story of when your partner had been killed, and obviously that's a huge loss. And it's not necessarily with forgiveness, but it's like, okay, I lost a partner,
emptiness,
and then I have to let that go, but to quickly get into maybe a relationship too soon. And so sometimes when we do need healing, and forgiveness is part of that, especially when there's an offense that's taken place. Letting go, sometimes we're like, oh, I can just let it go. I roll it off my shoulder. You're not really dealing with it. And it somehow will show up in other ways in your life. And that's why I also think it's imperative that we learn to forgive.
Do you believe every painful thing we go in life is attached to some form of forgiveness? What is unforgiveness? Because sometimes we go through things in life that we need to heal from, and they make us feel a certain kind of way. We need to feel our pain, our emotions. But is there a forgiveness in that? If so, is that a self-forgiveness? Do I need to forgive myself for feeling or the situation? So for me, when I think forgiveness, I think it's a choice. Like at this point, do I hold on to that, or do I heal through it? Right? Unforgiveness is, they hurt me. I don't know if I can ever look at that person again. Murder, whatever, or death penalty, whatever that looks like. I'm being extreme when I say that,
no, but it's relevant.
Or it could be, you hurt me, but I love myself enough to know that this is going to be for a moment, and eventually I'll forgive you because I feel sorry for you for treating me that way, or I feel sorry that you have to be that person in this life that you can't forgive yourself to be better. You can't rise up. That's what comes to my mind. Okay. I know that there's different things that go to different things when it comes to forgiveness, but I would challenge to ask, what is unforgiveness?
I think that there are things that in many people's mind, and this could be, it's incredibly debatable, of course, that some people will deem that are unforgivable. But I've literally seen people where they've had murderers and they've forgiven the murderer who's killed their family members, or someone who has been sexually violated or abused in some way, and they make the decision to say, I forgive you. But here's the thing. Forgiveness is also understanding that when you are forgiving them, it's the expression of saying, by me holding on to the anger, the bitterness, the resentment. It's an old saying that says, it's like me drinking the poison, waiting for the offender to die. And when we choose to not forgive someone, what we are saying to ourselves is, I choose to hold on to the pain. As though if I can just keep reliving it and remembering the offense and what has happened to me,
or leverage
in our mind, we can hold that person hostage, but then that person stays with us, and we never really truly get to let go.
Liberation is what I feel. The word that when I think of forgiveness is liberating. It's a self thing. You can say it out loud, but really it's an internal word for me when I think that way. I mean, that I speak for myself. Everybody's got their own experiences, but it's liberating to forgive. You're going to feel, I'm in agreement with feeling mad, feeling the emotions, even at some point in time saying, I can never forgive you. But as time goes on, the only way to release yourself from that pain is to let it go and forgive that situation, that person. You don't have to be in their life, them and yours, and yourself for allowing yourself to be whatever the circumstances in that situation. So there's different layers to that for sure. Does that help at all?
Yeah, no, and I'm just, like I said, I don't know why this one is like throwing me for a loop, but I do, I always got to have a story to.
Well, that's good.
What I love about
relatable.
you, Carmen. Yes, totally.
So, the Costa Rica relationship, I've talked about it. Guy we dated 1.5 years, and the reason we broke up in the first place was because he was a cheater. And I said I forgave him for that, right? Tried it again, and there's a bunch of other reasons. What it's really not that important. And I don't know if he believed that I forgave him, because he always brought it up. He always, I did this to you. I hurt you. I'm like,
well, he hadn't forgiven himself.
Well,
he hadn't forgiven himself. He hadn't
Because
forgiven himself.
that's your heart. Like,
right.
You could do that. Yeah.
However, when he did basically the same thing again, I felt a peace. It's almost like what you said. When he was out of my life, I actually was relieved he was out of my life, because I felt like I was settling anyway. And I'm not just saying that to be mean.
Right,
I knew
right.
deep down that this was not the relationship for me. But I felt disappointed, but it didn't hurt me as bad. So I don't know if that meant that I actually forgave him.
You let him go.
I also think too that maybe it wasn't, at that point, at that stage, there wasn't really anything to forgive. It was almost like you just accepted that that's who he was. Do you know what I mean? Because there's certain things
that makes a lot of sense.
When someone does something and we feel offended and we feel hurt by the person, and we're looking for forgiveness in that, sometimes we want them to be the one asking for the forgiveness. And I think it's very hard. It's very difficult to forgive someone who is not accountable to themselves or to what they've done, or they're unwilling to come to you and apologize to you. And sometimes the hard thing to let go is saying, how do they not see that they offended me and hurt me, and they're not asking for forgiveness, and now I have to forgive them. Right. And we get into this turmoil internally with that. But in your situation, I believe the first time there was this hurt and pain that said, I can't believe he did this. And in order for me to move forward in this relationship, I choose to forgive him. Okay. But I think
that's it right there.
It was a choice, right? But I also think that the second time around, when it reared its ugly head, there was something in you that was like, now this is not a matter of forgiveness. This is just me a matter of saying, am I going to lie to myself about this?
A different choice.
Or am I going to accept that this is who he is and just move on? So you didn't even need to forgive him. You just accepted who he was and made it unacceptable for you.
Kind of like when we're kids and we're playing, I'm sorry, I forgive you. Like if you want to simplify it to that point, it's an exchange of energy and words. But to what you said, for me, and this is a struggle I had in my relationships, if I didn't feel my intention was to hurt you, it's hard for me to say I'm sorry or that I did something.
It is
because I didn't, my intent was not to hurt you. However, now that I'm older, I realize I understand that made you feel that way. That was not my intention. And I'm sorry you're feeling that way, but I'm not sorry what I did, because my intention was not that.
Glad, No, I'm so glad you said that, because that's on the receiving end. And I can so relate to that everybody's offense is different. And we're talking, and again, there's different layers to being hurt. And I don't want to minimize anyone who's really gone through a great deal of pain from some horrific things. But in terms of what you're saying there, I think that's so key. Because one of the hard things too is that if someone has offended you or hurt you, and you want them to acknowledge and validate that the pain, it sometimes makes it easier to forgive them if they can acknowledge it. But there are literally some times where people's intention is not to hurt you, but their actions hurt you anyway. And there's nothing more frustrating from the recipient when the person, when you're telling them, I'm experiencing this from you, you are making me feel this way, and their mind is, oh, you're overreacting, or you're reading much too much, and that wasn't my intention. It's like, I don't need to defend yourself. I just need to know that you heard me. And sometimes just that validation really helps the forgiveness process,
And
even if you choose not to move forward in a relationship.
and just knowing most of the time as humans, it's not our intention to hurt anybody. We're just acting out of our own past
Emotions, yeah.
experiences, our own emotions, how you made me feel. So
That part there, go ahead. I'm challenged with that, and I'll go back around.
Oh, good, because
yeah.
this is actually a part of it. But this is
Okay.
good. This is good.
yeah, but I mean, if I hurt you by saying something, I mean, as we're older, we can communicate it better, you know.
Exactly. That the little kids. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
I had a girlfriend, and she was mad at me for something for like a month and a half. I'm like, girl, I didn't even know you were mad at me. Like, can you at least give me the opportunity to fix it? Just let me know you were mad at me. I didn't look what she was upset with me about. I don't look at it that way. I would never be upset with somebody for what she says I did, but I can't just disregard her feelings. if I
Correct.
hurt her.
Disregard. Right.
And I said, okay, now that I understand, I accepted what she said. I apologize that I made her feel that way, but that was not my intention to hurt her. I wasn't thinking about it that way. But now that I'm aware of it, I'll be more aware of how you want me to handle that.
And you were saying you were going to talk about what you were challenged by that. I want you to kind of tap into that.
There's two things here. First, the offense part of it. We are the ones who decide if we get offended on anything. I can't give you power to make me feel anything. And that's growth, right? I mean, I know we have to go through different stages. Some people get there. I think ego has a lot to do with all of this. Yeah. And that's where that exchange comes in. When we let the ego go, things are received and exchanged differently. Forgiveness then becomes maybe not even something we need to use, because we kind of have this understanding of what that is when we move. But we live in a time where ego stands out. I mean, people that's how they operate. And if we can get into a space where we don't, hopefully the people that are important in our life will recognize that and be that too. That's how I see that. Doesn't mean that's always the case.
Right, but you cannot deny if you have offended a person, because I mean, you can deny it. Let me rephrase that. You can absolutely deny it. But if a person is sharing with you, whether you agree with it or not, that you have hurt them, you don't have to.
I acknowledge.
But in
and
order for there to
yeah.
be a reconciliation of that, or to really get an understanding, we first have to validate that person feels that way, that they're experiencing
and
that.
And it's very valid. It doesn't matter. If I say something to you and hurt you, and you say, Carmen, you hurt me and I didn't think I hurt you, I'm basically telling you I don't care how you feel about it.
Yeah.
If
there's an apology and there's forgiveness. I acknowledge you and I apologize that what my action made you feel a certain kind of way. The forgiveness is then up to that person that's receiving my apology for whatever I didn't know I did, you know? So I get that part there, but it's a yin and a yang still. There's an exchange, and how that exchange occurs is how it turns out to be.
I think there's a yin and a yang, or sometimes there's just validate the person. It doesn't have to be tit for tat. If the person comes to me and they say, I'm hurt by what you've done or what you have said has offended me, you can get clarity in that and say, that was not my intention. Can you help me to understand what it was?
Yes.
And they can communicate that, but they have to feel safe. They have to feel that they're allowed to communicate and it not be a tit for tat. Because if every time I go, and I've been guilty of this, where the person wants to share with me what they feel offended by. And I'll hear what they want to say, but I really want to explain myself. And even in me trying to overly explain myself, they're not feeling like they're being heard. And they're like,
that's hard sometimes.
It is because you, especially if you love the person that you're offending, you don't want to feel like you've hurt someone that you love. But the bottom line is, we hurt people that we love, right? And yes, you can apologize, and yes, it's up to them to forgive you. But I think if you really care, it's also required for you to ask for the forgiveness. And humbly do so. It's not just an apology, because sometimes the apology can be condescending. Well, I'm sorry you felt that way when that wasn't my intention.
Yeah, I mean, if you're right, I mean, that's.
But I feel like a real sincere apology comes with, will you forgive me?
Well, when they hurt, you hurt. If you're hurting, I feel that. That's just, so it's circumstantial in my opinion too.
Yeah.
Again, you could say the same words and it's very soft, and the same words and it's very loud, and it's received differently.
Well, tonation,
it's offensive or it's received, and that's the other side of it too. But at the end, yes, can you forgive me for the making or being a part of the way that you feel? What I can't do is own that I made you, but I can own that you're feeling that way because of a trigger that I created or I brought up, or a feeling that you're having.
What do you mean?
A little ego.
Yeah.
Well, I'm speaking in those
What
terms.
do you mean you can't own that you made a person feel that way?
I can't, but I'm doing something to make them like intention, because it's behind intention. So if the intent is that nothing like that, because sometimes people are just feeling a certain kind of way just by you being there for whatever reasons those are. That's
what I was getting at when I said I don't think it's ever our intention to hurt people we care about. But sometimes you have to hear what that person is saying. Just because it's not your intention doesn't mean you're not wrong.
Right, you hear them, but again, we're talking forgiveness. They are forgiving me for apologizing, which I'll do. But what are they forgiving me for, really?
But if you don't know that, then why are you apologizing?
Because I hurt them, right? So if I'm here if I hurt you, and you need from me an apology for hurting you in whatever that is, whether
I don't feel like I should need it from you. I feel like if you really hear me and you understand the offense, that it should be natural for you to be sincere in your apology.
If we understand the offense,
I guess, and this
right.
is just languaging, right?
Yeah,
When you say you need me, I'm just, you need me to apologize, so I'm going to apologize because you feel like you hate me. There's no accountability in that language. When you're languaging in that way, there's no accountability. It's just basically what I'm hearing, and I could be wrong. As we're discussing this, all I'm hearing is it's a formality for you.
And it's also, it's very subjective. All of this topic is not black and white
right,
at all.
course,
but we
absolutely.
can get very passionate about circumstances because we can relate. And it's not that's anybody's, they're bad or good.
Yeah.
It's just things that happen where there's miscommunication.
Right.
That's why relationships battle. That's why mother-daughters have issues, fathers, whatever. Especially the closer you are to the person, the more you can hurt them.
Absolutely.
And the deeper that apology and forgiveness is necessary.
Correct.
So sometimes we have to decide how deep do we want to go with that person too. And if you love them, as you said, how much you care, then we take it there and we go to, this is work.
Yeah.
All of this is the work, right? So if you're a girl I'm just meeting on the street, you're my friend, I want to be your friend, or where at some point, if you're not communicating with me what I'm doing to make you feel a certain kind of way, what do I do? Like, what does anybody do? But if you value the relationship, which I usually do, everyone until I don't, because of whatever reasons, then you make that effort.
So
but there's a lot there.
I do want to go into, this is kind of going into that a little bit, when it comes to forgiveness. And there's two different components, even based on the article I was reading. One is a decisional forgiveness and an emotional forgiveness. And I think that the misconception often is that the moment a person decides to forgive someone, usually the recipient of that forgiveness has the assumption of thinking that forgiveness is like, okay, we can move on, that it's a forgotten concept. But it takes time. And it takes time until the forgiveness becomes an emotional forgiveness. And I think that the grace is often not there, because usually the person who is the offender, especially if they really love or care for a person and they really have remorse over what they've done, it's very hard. They want that person to hurry up and get over it.
Is it safe to say this topic is for someone you love in this conversation? Because that's how I feel.
Well, I think that's just the rabbit hole we went down.
Yeah, but that's good. Because that brings light for me too in this topic. Because there's depth to that, and you have to have a relationship with someone to actually discuss this further in that way.
Yeah. But we'll go. I want you to get your point in too, Ms. Carmen. But I also want to talk about forgiveness when you can't have a conversation, when the person isn't acknowledging, when they're not going to validate you. Maybe the person's dead. There's that level of forgiveness too. It could be.
But once upon a time, there was a love, there was a relationship there.
But I guess the point is, like you said, I have to make a decision. If something that has happened to me in my life has caused me a great deal of pain, it has caused me to be bitter, it has caused me to stifle my life, or I don't feel like moving forward because of what has happened to me, at some point, part of that healing, forgiveness is a huge part to that. It's the lock and key to almost remove you from being stuck. Yeah. That holding on is anchoring your being. And you're not always going to be able to have a conversation with an offender, and it's going to be something that's reciprocated, and it ends up at the end of a rainbow with a pot of gold. That's not always the case in forgiveness. Some of these people, your forgiveness doesn't mean reconcile and go back or to be with a person. It's just something that is required as part of your healing.
My father, for example, that's what comes up too. Yeah, right? You just feel
You were
that-
going to say something. I know I keep cutting you off
Oh,
too.
no. I kind of lost what I was going to say, but I know, like, there's so many levels to forget.
Right,
And I
right.
think that's where the struggle with me because I don't know why this topic but
yeah.
my dad, it'll be a year that he's passed this
Wow.
month, but, I think back, I guess I was taking it really deep. Like, what are my deep rooted issues or forgiveness? Not like me and my girlfriend had an argument and I forgive her. Or
Yes.
whatever. You know,
Yes.
like, what are my deep seated issues? And my dad, he said, I'm so glad you've forgiven me, on his deathbed. And I'm like, he never asked me to forgive him.
Is how you
He
showed
never
up for
asked
him.
me.
Wow.
But he never asked me. He just said, I'm so glad you forgave me.
He just
and it was
assumed.
just like,
it's the love.
No,
It-
that's not,
no.
not necessarily.
I'm not saying it in a settling way.
Okay.
I was just like, wow. Like, he acknowledged in his mind, that was his acknowledgement of asking me for forgiveness. And maybe I needed to. And now I'm like, I needed to. I held on to so much
What
over
a
the
life
years.
lesson, yeah.
And I think that's why this topic is like,
Mm-hmm.
because I
But
think
there's
I let
depth.
everything go. I don't let nothing bother
Mhm.
me. I don't hold grudges, but I held a grudge against my dad for my whole life.
Even now, or have you forgiven that?
No,
What
I
is
think
it? What do you feel when you think that?
that's why I'm struggling with
Okay,
it.
that's fair. This is your experience.
So
Yeah,
But that's profound.
yeah, it
Here
is
I go.
very much.
No, but
It
share,
is.
share.
It is.
So and I know we're going to talk about that on another, and I'll probably go more into it so I could process it some. But I was like, wow, that's how and that was his process,
Mhm.
I guess, which is okay.
Mhm.
But I'm like, God, I never experienced that forgiveness fully. I don't think.
And that's that's so profound. And
Yeah.
I, first of all, appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
But to hear that, because you're interpreting it different than how even I was
Mm-hmm.
interpreting it.
Yeah, I
but-
thought it was the other way around
No,
somehow. Yeah,
but
but
it's
I get
like-
it.
so many
I get it
layers
now.
to
There's
yes.
so many layers.
Forgiveness.
So
Yes.
it's like, here it is. I'm caring for my father in his end of life. And there's a lot of unresolved. There's conversations that'll never be had and things like that. But he just summed it up on his own and just assumed that
You
because here
showing
I
up
am.
To me is forgiveness.
But that's wrong.
Right, I know.
Right? That's
just
just her being compassionate.
Yes.
She may love her dad and have set things aside because it was in a time of need, but it doesn't mean that that there hasn't been parts that needed forgiveness and it needed a conversation. And as we start this series, we are actually going to be doing an entire show on forgiving our fathers. We're going to do a show on forgiving our mothers, and also a segment on forgiving ourselves, because those are the deep-rooted layers of how we show up in our lives today. Some of the things that we haven't forgiven in our childhood because we didn't understand how to forgive. There are certain conversations that are difficult to have with our parents if they're still alive. To say, when you did this or when I experienced this, it hurt me. And it's very hard for parents sometimes to acknowledge the pain they bestowed on their children. It's for the best. And I had like you said, I had good intentions. You didn't understand what I was going through. But the child doesn't care about that. They just need to know, I hear you. And sometimes they just need that.
as a mother, I'm learning that with my
Yeah.
child.
Mhm.
So this is good for the reverse too. We're all moms here. You know, there's times where, hopefully she forgives me for things I didn't know I'm doing, but I acknowledge that
Right.
from her, and not to try to over explain. But that wasn't where I was coming from, honey. Your mom has good intentions. I'm looking after you, but she feels a certain kind of way. I gotta accept that.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and I have to acknowledge that because that's her feelings, and
I
that's
think
what she's
explanation
doing.
comes later.
Yeah.
I think when a person feels vulnerable enough and brave enough to confront a person that they feel that has offended them, whether it's their mother, their father, their grandparent, a lover, whatever it may be, when they finally feel it in them to say it without anger, without rage, but to just sit down and say, this is what you've done to me and this is how I felt, that is not the time for the person to explain themselves. They just have to listen and say, I heard you. I'm sorry to not know that it made you feel this way. I apologize that that's your experience. Will you forgive me? And ask an explanation. If there's a need to explain yourself, we talked about ego. That's your ego, right? When you feel like you got to tell them and give them, they don't
almost
care.
it's a defense, yeah.
Right. And it's so hard not to do it. Because like I said, I am 100% guilty, whether it's my son, whether it's my ex. There were times when he wanted to share, this is what I'm upset about. And I just want to explain myself. I just want to defend my position and explain myself. But the person never gets their validation with that.
And when they're sharing and they feel that vulnerability, it's just like, it's not about how you feel. It's just how I feel. It doesn't matter what you feel. This is how you made me feel. Yeah.
So another thing that I want to, let me grab my little notes
here. This is a good topic.
It's really good. And it's,
deep.
Because it does go deep. Because I think as human beings, if we've lived long enough, we know that we've been offended, but we've also at some point in our lives have been the offender. And I think this is also what helps some of the stages of forgiveness, is to learn empathy and compassion for the person who has offended you. And this, when it comes to my ex-husband, this was the hardest thing for me in true candor. I was so hurt and he had broken me so much that I didn't want to have any compassion for him whatsoever. At some point, the anger and the rage and the brokenness is what helped me to forge ahead and get past it. So kind of like that TED Talk that we watched, that was necessary in the beginning because I knew that the relationship was really unhealthy and I needed the anger and the rage and the bitterness to really force my way out of it. But at some point when I was done,
that's a good interpretation.
It lingered. Yeah. And I kept holding on to it as though I had to. So when I met somebody and date, it came in and it came into the relationship, it crept in. Now this person was going to pay for whatever the other person did because I hadn't forgiven him. And the thing that I had to do really, truly is to say, when I was loving him, when we were loving one another, what did I see in this man? What are the stories he shared with me when he was vulnerable about his childhood, about his experiences? And I started to realize that we were not very different as far as our pain. We just showed up differently in it. And I started to feel sorry for him and I started to weep for him. And I started thinking, how sad is it that he couldn't receive my love because he doesn't love himself? And that's when the forgiveness began. And when I started that process, then I had to ultimately forgive myself because the reality was I was betraying myself too in that relationship because I wanted him to be somebody he was not. And so then I ultimately had to forgive myself. And that was a harder pill to swallow than forgiving him. But the moment I did it, made the decision, right? The decision of forgiveness, it eventually got into an emotional forgiveness. And then I was at peace. But it took time and a lot of time. And I think
like
that's
what
the
I
thing
said
too.
Earlier, when you could see the other person's pain and you can forgive that, because really essentially that's what we're doing. As you saw your ex-husband, similar to you felt sorry for him because you recognized that he couldn't love or be that person or do those things that it takes to get there. But you also recognize it because it was in you to recognize. And then you had that exchange of your own empowerment to forgive yourself and move from that point forward. But really it's to me, it still goes back to being healing and spiritual forgiveness, because at whatever layer that is, there's something to learn and feel through that, or come to a place of loving and feeling either yourself or whoever that person is on both ends. So.
And I think, and I love the spiritual aspect of it, but I don't want people to feel like if they're not in touch spiritually, if they're not spiritual people, they're incapable of forgiveness,
Spiritual, though, I think in that sense, is just an internal, right? Just
an internal thing,
yeah. It's not religious or anything like that,
yeah. But I totally get it because I'm in that same realm with you. But I think some people have a
energetic.
They have a disconnect with it,
yeah.
And so I don't want there to be a misconception if they don't feel like they're connected spiritually, that they have an inability to forgive. You were going to say something? I'm going to pull up this little note that I wrote that I have here from the article. So it says that their research shows, the scientist research shows that forgiveness doesn't necessarily imply that you approve or condone a given mistake, that you delete it from your mind or forget it, or you disregard its consequences. Additionally, scientists note that genuine forgiveness does not require reconciliation. This is probably pertaining to maybe friendships and intimate partnerships, or even sometimes your family members, for example. You know, it's not, it doesn't discriminate, right? Hurt is hurt. So I think that, again, that's another misconception, to say, you know, I'm going to forgive this person because it's part of the healing process. But that doesn't mean that I need to pick up the phone necessarily and say, come back to my life, be in my life, or that it negates any of the consequences to the action. I think sometimes there's a misconception with that.
That's my father's right there, everything about that.
Really?
Yeah, that's my dad. Well, I forgive him from and love him from afar, because but I don't feel anything towards him in a negative way. I love him from here, and that's safe, and that feels good for me. And in life, you know, we have to make those types of decisions to keep boundaries, so you can keep that lightness in that forgiveness.
Yeah.
It's like if somebody borrows money, I don't have to not be your friend. I just can't loan you any money anymore. So I put you in the box over here.
Right.
You know, it teaches you how to compartmentalize people.
And another big thing too, which is something also from the article, kind of along that's what jarred my thing, is forgiveness is how you perceive the situation, right? So for example, in the article it talked about, I could be really angry and enraged by someone who steals from me. And in my mind, I see the offense as, why would you take from me when I was a giving person, as an example? But let's say the offender discloses, or I find out that the reason why they're stealing is because they're feeding their hungry family and they don't have anything. It might make the forgiveness a little bit easier, because the perception of why the person has done what they've done. And we could go into many layers on that, even down to some serious offenses,
very broad,
where you want to, like we watched this TED Talk, and it was on, this girl did this beautiful thing. I'll post the link, because it was a great TED Talk on forgiveness. And in her scenario, a young man who her mother had taken in and helped out, he went into their home and he killed the brother. And after he killed the brother and left, and he realized he forgot his jacket, when he went back to go get his jacket, this is where this guy's mind was. The mother was there screaming, and he killed the mother. And for a long time in her life, she held on to this perpetrator, even though he was in prison and stuff. And at some point she realized, I'm making this man a monster based on one day. And I don't know his backstory. And I could be offended and not want to forgive him for what he did to my mother, or to my brother. But the reality is, that's not what I'm looking to forgive. I have to forgive what he did to me. Yes, my mother's dead. Yes, my brother's dead. But there's a consequence that left on my life. And do I really want to hold him a monster? Because the longer I keep him, I attach him to my life story forever.
That's a if you look at,
and it's powerful, and it's profound, and it's very difficult to do.
Yeah, you got to watch it.
It was good. It was good.
Yeah.
I'll put the link so people can watch that.
For me, it was when she talked about you have to have scars, and the anger, like you have to lash out. And me, I will suppress things and I won't lash out. I won't get upset. I'll just be like, I got it. It's good. And I keep putting it down deeper and deeper.
There's a name for that.
But I need to learn I can express how I feel about something, but I will process it to where I can articulate it well enough so I'm not upset about it. And sometimes, but if I get there to where I'm upset, I'm done. You know what I mean? I'm ready to.
Well, there's leverage in pain,
so.
and to an extent, because there's a breaking point in your pain. And if you suppress it, you don't allow it to give you that breaking point that says, this type of energy, this experience that I have, I'm dealing with it. So I don't have to deal with it ever again. Do you know what I mean? And not to say that things won't come to your life, but you'll be much more cautious and much more aware when you learn to really to deal with pain. Forgiveness is tough.
Yeah.
I struggle with it, but it's when I would go back to the ego thing, we have offended, and we have been offended, And it's hard to forgive someone else, but yet we always want the mercy on our end. You know what I mean? And so I think sometimes in the situations in my life, and I have some deep rooted things that I had to really let go of from childhood, that we'll get into in the other shows, that really was these pivotal things for me that was responsible for my rage. It was responsible for my anger. It was responsible for some sabotaging I was doing in my adult life. Not realizing that me holding on to my little girl's offenses was really controlling my present day life, and being able to let that go and heal from that. And a lot of it had required a lot of forgiveness, and it took time, but it's liberating when you can finally get there, especially on the emotional side of it.
Absolutely. And I believe it to be a self decision. Forgiveness is, we choose that. It has to be a choice that we have inside of us. And with that choice, we start to feel and heal. And that's the process of that. And I mean, of course, we've got many topics coming, but there's a lot of examples we can give others. I'm sure that everybody could relate to something,
right?
You know?
All right. So I think this is a good way to kind of close, just kind of the basis of forgiveness. We are going to make this a series. So you definitely want to stay tuned, especially if you're dealing with issues of forgiveness, whether you are needing to forgive yourself over something you've done, or if there's somebody or something that you need to learn to forgive so you can liberate and free yourself. We will be doing a series, forgiving your mother, forgiving your father, and then forgiving yourself. So you don't want to miss that if you are struggling with forgiveness. Any conclusions before we end the show? Miss Charlene?
Forgiveness makes you lighter. Just like, it's like you're peeling down the wall of something that's just holding you down. So forgive it's really healing for us, our souls, I believe. Yeah.
What about you, Miss Carmen?
I don't know. I'm lost today. I'm lost.
I think that's so
That's
real,
good,
though.
I'm
That's
lost.
yeah.
I got to learn what forgiveness really means.
That's pretty deep.
I thought I knew until you brought this topic up today. Like,
no, but that's good. That's deep. I love that.
Yeah, so
No, that is good, because it has to feel connected.
yeah, and I know I can forgive people for stuff, but deep-seated issues, I don't know.
It's right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right. And you know, and real quick, sometimes it's hard to forgive because it means you have to unearth. And unearthing things that you feel like you've kind of, and you're convincing yourself you let go. We're not aware of what's showing up in our lives, you know. So I guess for me, forgiveness is, yes, this happened to you. Yes, this person did this to you. Yes, it was wrong. Yes, you are hurt. But you cannot move forward if you hold on to something that happened yesterday and bring it into your today. And part of the lock and key to that is forgiveness. So until next time, thank you all for watching. This is also on YouTube, so please don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button. We would like to hear from you all. And thank you again for the continued support on The Mindsetters. Until next time, ciao.